All right, guys, welcome back to the Frankie D'Astoli show. We have a lot to discuss today. We are going to be talking about infant baptism, as I just was at my niece's baptism last night, and I was asked to create a little speech for them. So we're going to get into some of that, the importance of it, why we do it, and why it's so undervalued today. The bulk of this episode is actually going to fall around how we lost $30,000 on flipping our recent property. It was my first ever flip. I've been buying real estate for over 18 months now, mainly in the rental department with obviously some wholesale, as some of you guys know. But we had our first flip and it was quite interesting. So we're going to get all that. We have a lot to go over. And then Advent is upon us. This Sunday starts the Advent season. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Advent, but I do have a specific episode coming out later this week on Advent. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, guys. So yesterday I was asked to speak at my niece's baptism. Now, I'm not the godfather. My cousin Joey is. But when you kind of go around and you start talking about your faith a lot, you can create groups like Rosary and Real Estate, and you just kind of have a podcast where you're constantly talking about it. Family members tend to look to you to potentially give some speeches or talk about things, especially in, family members' lives when it comes to journeying in their faith. So I was asked to say a little speech, and it had me really thinking about the fact that we really undervalue baptism. And I think, we focus so much on a child's birthday, right? And even for myself and my wife, our daughter Bernadette, she turned 2 on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. And we had such a great, time celebrating her, of course. We got presents, we had a great day. But what is the difference between, an actual birthday and baptism? And there's actually a very significant difference. And I think honestly, what we need is we need to start valuing the baptism day almost equally as we do a child's birthday. And I'll explain why. So when a child is born, there's such beauty to it, of course, right? And when it's done correctly in a marriage sacrament, excuse me, the love between husband and wife is so strong that what comes from that love is a child. It's tangible. How do we describe love, right? We describe love in the things that maybe our spouse does for us in some cases, right? That act of kindness, that word of affection. Those are the way that it's tangible in the form of emotion, it's tangible in the form of words. But when you love someone so much that what comes from it is a physical child, that is tangible. That is real love. And for us Catholics, we see that in the Trinity, right? We see that the Father loved the Son so much, and what came from that love was the Holy Spirit. And a marriage, a family is a Trinity within itself. The husband loves the wife is the beloved, and from that love comes the form of a child. So when you have a child that is born, there's such ambiance to it. It's beautiful, right? Of course, I remember when my daughter was born and I remember when my son was born. It was the two best days of my life. Because what's coming is that tangible love that you have for your spouse in the form of a child. And it's your job to raise that child up, to, help them in regards to everything that they go through, to provide for them, all of those things. But it's very, very beautiful. And there's, nothing taking away from the beauty of that child being born, but there's something that's very important that we really need to understand. And it's that when a child is born, they're born with something called original sin. And I think I might have spoken about this on this podcast before, but original sin originates from our, very first parents, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and the serpent entered the garden, the devil, Satan, and he tempted Eve, and Adam was not around. This is a big point to understand, right? And this is another reason why when fathers are not in the picture, it's very, very hard for a child to have good development. It's very, very hard for the wife to be, fulfilled, to be protected is honestly a really good word to use here, because we see that the serpent tempts Eve. She eats of the forbidden fruit that she was commanded by God not to eat. And then we see that Adam comes in, he sees that his wife ate it, and she persuades him to eat it as well. And what happens? They fall out of communion with God. And that is sin, right? Sin is when you are cutting, when you sin, you are cutting the cord between you and God. A mortal sin, like, obeying an idol or murder or adultery, things along those lines, that is severing the cord, truly like cutting the cord off. And the only way to reinstill that cord is through the sacrament of confession. But there are venial sins as well, which we commit every single day, right? But in any regard, that is the form, that is how sin entered the world. Now, when a child is born, although it is the most beautiful, monumentous moment of life, seeing your love for your spouse in physical form, in the form of a child, it is between both of you, half and half in one. It's also a moment of reflection to understand that they are born with original sin. That sin from our very first parents of Adam and Eve is passed down. And when we baptize a child, we wash them away from that original sin. So to kind of make it a step further, when your child is born, they, in a sense, are marked by sin, and sin originated from the devil. So in a sense, although it sounds very intense, your child has the mark of Satan on them. Now, they are children of God. Every child is a children of God. But when you baptize your child, you cleanse them of the original sin, which means Satan no longer has any hold on them. They are marked by Jesus Christ. And that is why I think we really need to push celebrating baptism days equally as much as celebrating birthdays, right? Because the birthday, of course, that child is brought to life. Love is in a physical, tangible form that is outside of the womb, although it starts immediately upon conception. But when they are baptized, they are cleansed of that original sin and they become a true child of God within the Catholic Church. And I think that's so beautiful. And for anybody that's, maybe not Catholic and you're listening to this, Catholicism, again, this isn't necessarily to, be an evangelical podcast and convert people, although I pray that it does. But Catholicism has such deep roots, right? It's the original church that Christ formed. It was the universal church for 1,500 years. There's such deep roots within these sacraments. And this is what we believe. This is what we know to be true from Christ himself. So when your child is baptized, they are cleansed of any sin, right? The original sin that was initially stained on them. So, of course, when a child is born, they are so innocent. And that's what people love children, right? Why do people love children so much? It's because of innocence. They see innocence in a child. And that's something that everybody strives for, because as life goes on, that innocence does not stay, right? That purity goes away. With every sin, purity goes away. And of course, absolution through confession purifies, repurifies, cleanses. But a child is sinless, especially once that original sin is taken away, and there's so much innocence there. So again, being able to speak at my niece's baptism yesterday was a great honor. I'm very honored to have been asked that. And that was kind of my point. It was that we need to be remembering our children's baptism days. And my daughter is January 28th. My son is June 29th. He was June 29th of 2025. My daughter was January 28th of 2024. So those are days that we will always celebrate, because this is days that they become true, members of the church, and it opens up their path to salvation. So we're going to switch gears here, because that's what I love to do, right? We love to switch gears. That's why it's called Rosary and Real Estate, because we talk about faith, we talk about the Rosary, and then we talk about real estate. And just a note on Rosary and Real Estate before we get moving forward into the real estate side of this episode. We have an event coming up November 25th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. We have a virtual Rosary and Real Estate event. It is our second ever virtual event. We had a very, very successful first virtual event. And ever since we opened up the school page, and if you're not familiar with the Rosary and Real Estate school page, just go to www.rosaryandrealestate.com, hit join RARE. RARE stands for Rosary and Real Estate, and be rare when you join Rosary and Real Estate. And you could join the school page, and the school page has been fantastic. I think at this point we're up to 81 members. I'm pushing to get to 100. We're going to do an awesome giveaway at 100. So if you are not a school member, in order to be a part of that giveaway, you need to be a school member. So go join the Rosary and Real Estate School. But we have an event coming up November 25th, 6:30 p.m. We're going to be talking about the promises of the Rosary that our Blessed Mother gave St. Dominic and Blessed Alan de la Roche. And we are also going to be talking about passive income strategies, specifically in the real estate space, although we are going to dabble just a little bit in some other opportunities that we might talk a little bit further about in some future events. But this is a free event, guys. I do these for free. Truthfully, I spend more money on these events than we make, because we don't make any money. We ask for charitable donations, usually to Good Counsel Homes, which is a foundation that focuses on, ensuring that mothers don't have abortions and that they're able to bring their child through full term and be born, as we just talked about, that beauty of a child being born, and helping them care for that child while the father's not in the picture, because that's an unfortunate reality. Again, that Trinity, that triune love that Archbishop Fulton Sheen talks a lot about is a beautiful thing. And when the father is missing, it's very sad. It's very sad. And these mothers, they need encouragement. They need encouragement to bring these child through pregnancy, a tough pregnancy with no father in the picture, and to care for that child after. And they need provisions to do that. So we usually ask for charitable donations to Good Counsel Homes. But in any regard, they're totally free events, guys. They're totally free events. I give away my knowledge, my understanding, my expertise in the real estate space that I've gathered over the past 4 years of being in it. And ultimately, I think what people get the most out of it is the increase in faith. I think that's the biggest thing, and that's definitely the thing that I'm most proud of. But that's tomorrow, or November 25th, depending on when you're listening to this, at 6:30 p.m. So now we are going to do the switch. So we're going to pull the lever. We're going to switch gears. How I lost, I should say we, my partner Steven and I, how we lost $30,000 on a flip. Now, I just want to preface this before we get into this, guys. My bank account didn't go negative 30,000, right? We still made money on this flip. So I'm very appreciative of that. And to be totally truthful with you, when we closed on the HUD, it was a HUD for $59,000. We still owed about $15,000 to contractors. So we walked away with about $45,000, which is still great. But in actuality, we should have made about $80,000 on this flip. And I'm going to explain why. So I'm going to bring you guys through a few things. We're going to talk about where the deal came from, how we analyzed the deal, and then the hiccups that happened throughout the deal that costed those $30,000. A lot of this is off the cuff, in truth. So I'm going to try to calculate some of these as we go. I don't have it in front of me, but we're going to kind of move through that as swiftly as we possibly can. But so this deal came to me and my partner from a wholesaler, right? And again, if you're not familiar with wholesalers, basically simple analogy: someone wants to sell a house, an investor wants to buy the house. The wholesale is the person in the middle. They talk with the person that wants to sell it. They get it under contract. They then sell the rights of that contract to that investor for what's called an assignment fee. So let's just say, in this case, I'll give you guys an example. We bought the house for $141,500. I believe the wholesaler had it under contract for $120,000. So they made an assignment fee of about $21,500. When you think about that, that's pretty awesome, right? We made net $45,000 in a 6-month time frame, almost 7-month time frame. They made $21,500 in a 30-day time frame. So who actually profited better? The wholesaler. Now, that doesn't mean that the wholesaler nickeled and dimed us and we got a bad deal, right? We still made money on this deal, a good amount of money for the most part, and we could have made a lot more, in truth. But you could see how powerful wholesaling could be, right? And here's something that was very interesting: is we were the highest bidders on this property. There were multiple bids. And at the time of buying this, again, this was about 7 months ago, we very much were like, oh man, like, are we overpaying for this? Like, we don't really like to be the highest bidder most of the time, right? We like to try to be not the highest bidder, but find ways like, being able to pay in cash because we use private money and, quicker closings and things like that to try to up our offer. So when we were coming in, and this is in a little bit of a different area than what we're typically buying, and it's, by the way, me and my partner's first flip together. He's done a few flips before me. I'm mainly in the rental and wholesale department, so this is new for me. But we were kind of like, man, this is kind of crazy. Like we're the highest bidder. It's pretty wild. Is it still a good deal? That thought was definitely going through our head. But we ended up getting it, and we got it at the highest bid of $141,500. And here's why it's a good deal. So we're going to break down the numbers, right? This is very important, the analysis part of it. But before we get into the analysis part of it, in regards to the wholesalers, if you are looking for off-market deals, if you feel like it's hard to find deals on the MLS in your area through real estate agents, you guys need to get on wholesalers' emails list. It's very, very easy to do. Here's a quick tip: go on Facebook, join groups such as, let's just say you invest in Kentucky off-market real estate, Lexington off-market housing, wholesalers of Kentucky, things along those lines. Anything. You do that for anything: California, Colorado, New Mexico, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Go on those groups and post in those groups and say, hey, my name's Frankie D'Astoli. I'm a real estate investor in this area. I'm looking to be added to a few wholesaler groups as I'm looking to buy, X amount of wholesale deals by, end of Q1 or something along those lines, right? And you basically post that. Wholesalers are going to reach out to you. They're going to add you to your list. And all of a sudden, now you're getting a deal sent to you. Now, are they always good deals? No. So you got to be, cognizant of that. You got to need to know how to analyze those deals. But for the most part, that's how you get on those lists. That's how you get some of these deals sent to you. Also networking, and there's a bunch of other things. But getting back to it. So let's analyze this deal. We're buying it for $141,500. Now, most people know the formula of after repair value times 70% minus repairs is what you should buy a deal for. And again, that's a good generic formula, but that's not the formula that we used on this particular deal. With our particular deal, we try to get a little bit more in tune with, the actual property and the after repair value and what the kind of details are. That 70% in that formula that I just gave you guys, that accounts for 30% of profit in there, along with closing costs and holding costs. So it's kind of a generic, right? And again, a lot of times when you're calculating this stuff out, it could work, it could be good, but ARV times 70% minus repairs on $100,000 house is going to be a lot different than ARV times 70% minus repairs on $1 million house is going to be. There's a huge delta swing there, right? Because making, $10,000 on $100,000 flip is going to be different than making, $300,000 on $1 million flip. Like there's going to be toggle there. If you're following what I'm saying, you're not necessarily going to say, hey, I need to make $300,000 on $1 million flip. You might be fine with making, $80,000 to $100,000 there. So that 70% could very much hurt you when you actually go to try to, acquire that deal and get that deal done. So you just want to kind of understand. So the way that I really break this down is the formula that I use is what is the after repair value? That's very, very important, right? What's going to be that final sales price? So in our case, we pinned this at roughly, I want to say we felt confident at like 275, but we had hopes that it could hit 300. So let's just use round number purposes here. 300,000 minus your repair cost. What did we pin at repair cost? We pinned about $60,000 in repair costs. That puts you at 240 minus your closing costs, which from the buyer side, we pay all closing costs. And on the sell side, because it's on market, we're most likely going to split. So we had about $20,000 in closing costs, right? So now we're at 220 minus holding costs. So every single month we carried an interest only payment of about $2,000. If this is a 6-month term, that's 2,000 times 6 months, that's $12,000. So subtract out another 12,000 there. That puts us at 208. All right. Now 208 is what we have that number at, where we have the ARV, the repairs, the holding costs, and the closing costs. 208. What are we purchasing this property at? We're purchasing it for what we bid it at of 141,500. And that is where that gap is that you could really understand how much profit you want to make. So if you were going into this and you were saying, hey, I'm willing to just make $30,000 in profit. Now you're saying, okay, 208 minus 30,000 is 278, or 178. So I could pay up to $178,000 for this property. It's pretty crazy, right? And we got it for 141,500. So that 208 minus that 141,500 leaves a pretty big gap there, right? That's about $65,000 in profit, which is what we initially had it pinned at. And again, I think we were saying that we might even maybe gotten away with like 80 because we budgeted for about a $60,000 reno, but we thought we could do it for a little bit less. So that's how we really analyzed that flip. Again, the ARV at 70%. I'm just going to do that real fast on that deal. So 300,000 times 70% ARV is 210 minus repairs, right? So we had it at 60,000 in repairs. That's 150, which is exactly like kind of on that par level, right? So again, you're seeing here, guys, the picture that I'm trying to paint there is that ARV times 70% is a generic formula, but it's not necessarily the formula that you should absolutely be using on your flips, right? Because clearly we did not use that formula. We still walked away with a net profit of 45,000, and ultimately really should have made a lot more, but we made mistakes during the reno, which I'm going to explain. But that's a big point to really understand is stop focusing die hard on the ARV at 70% minus repairs. That is a beginner level formula. It's a good formula to enter into when you start analyzing numbers. And clearly that's where pretty much everybody was analyzing the deal at, was that ARV at 70%, because we came in at 141,500 and we still won that deal. So that's kind of the background, the wholesaling, the analysis. Let's get into what went wrong. And I think this is so important. So we have a good set of contractors that we've used from the very beginning. And this is a big thing that my partner, Steve, brought to the partnership. He had a contractor relationship for roughly 4 years before him and I started working together in regards to buying housing. In April of this year will be 2 years that Steve and I closed on our first house together. We're now up to 37 houses. But he had a really good relationship with this contractor. And that was huge because I didn't have that relationship. So he brought that relationship to our business, and that contractor has been our steady guy ever since. Now, we've increased volume a lot. We started buying a lot more houses. We have currently about anywhere between 4 to 7 projects going on at one time. So it's more than our, regular relationship contractor can handle. He's probably good for about 3, maybe 4. So we had to go out and search for additional contractors. And this is where the bulk of the problem came out, right? So at this point now, we have about 3 contract rotations that are going, but we were 7 months ago, we were in the search for more. And I love working with people that I'm close with. You know, but at the end of the day, it's called, you know, show business. It's not called friend business. And we had a situation where a friend of mine was, and he's still by all means a good friend of mine, great guy, great man, nothing against him in any regard. But we had an instance where, you know, we were doing a lot of volume, and that's where we get to. We pay because of volume. We don't pay the highest rates to contractors, but we ensure that they have steady work. That's how we really operate, right? Because we're doing so many jobs, we're able to say, hey, listen, we're not going to be able to pay the highest that you might get on a singular job for somebody who's, you know, renovating their own house or doing a flip. But because we have a lot of rental properties and we're doing a lot of these different, you know, BRRRR strategies and we're doing turnovers, you are going to have work for as long as we're in business. That's the way we pretty much phrase this, right? And when I approached it to this gentleman who's a friend of mine, that's basically what I said. I was like, listen, on average, we pay this per property. And I know that's probably a lot lower than what you're used to because you deal with some good house, you know, quality and all of that stuff and some good areas. But we do have a lot of volume. So I could give you, you know, 2 to 3 jobs at a time if you want. And everything seemed like it was going really well. This was very well received. It was, you know, on the same page. He came to look at this particular project. And I think where we made a mistake is this is a flip, right? This isn't a BRRRR where we're going to rent it out. And we might have put a little bit too much stock in that relationship on a flip property. Whereas maybe we should have gave it to our typical crew, but we felt that this guy did higher quality work and we wanted that work on this particular flip. So we brought him in for this particular job and we walked it. Everything was going really well. We agreed on price. And even after we agreed on price, my partner Steve and I upped our price a little bit because it was his first deal and because we were flipping it. We said, hey, we know that this is our average rate, but because this is our first time working together, we want to establish a good working relationship. And also we understand we're flipping this house, right? It's not a rental where we want to kind of, you know, if we have a few mistakes, we might just say, hey, it's not that big of a deal. We want it to be absolutely perfect. So we're going to pay a little bit more in addition to that. And again, everything was in agreement. Now, here's where it gets a little bit dicey. So again, he runs his contracting business. He GCs his contracting business. Steve, my partner, is our project manager. Now, he's not a licensed project manager. He's not a licensed general contractor. When I say he's our project manager, his role in the business is to go to the projects every single day, to check in, to make sure everything's going well, to make sure the material's ordered on time, and just be kind of a helping hand for anything that's necessarily needed. He's not necessarily coming out with the work schedule and timing the contractors and, you know, all of that other type of stuff. So there was a little bit of unhealthy expectations set from the very beginning. I think our contractor friend thought that Steve was going to do a lot of that type of role, and he felt that he didn't have to do so much of his role. Whereas my partner Steve felt like, oh, this guy's really established. He's got his own company. Like, we'll be all right. Like, he knows what he's doing. That was a big problem, right? There was not good, healthy expectations set from the jump, and that was very much felt from the beginning. And first week or two, things are going really, really well. By the way, we closed this April 1st. We didn't start working on this project until about mid-May, and we wanted to get this on the market beginning of June. And this was really a 4-week project. I mean, there wasn't a ton of work to really get done. You know, so we were pretty confident that, listen, we're going to start this, you know, beginning, middle of May. We'll have it wrapped up beginning of June. We'll get it listed maybe by the end of June, the latest. I think that was kind of our timeline on it. And week 1, going well. Week 2, kind of going well. Week 3, things start hitting the fan. And throughout this, you know, the way we really schedule our contract is we say, hey, listen, you're going to get half the payment halfway through the project, and then you're going to get the full payment at the end of the project when we go through and we do our final walkthrough and we feel everything's up to par. Again, all of this was agreed upon. And after the first week, you know, he's asking us to send over a payment. And again, I don't mind accommodating certain things. And we were fine to do it. We said, hey, that's, you know, not a problem. We understand. Again, this is how we operate. We'll, you know, let it be this one time, but just moving forward, this is how it was. And he was totally understanding of that. And he said, hey, look, I usually wouldn't ask something like this, but I just, you know, kind of need it for a few things that are going on. If you could help me out here. And again, not a problem. But then when things started going wrong is when things started happening in the house, not to what we liked. So for instance, the kitchen was put in, it was put in incorrectly. And, you know, Steve's communicating with him and Steve sends me over a screenshot of the picture of the kitchen and Steve kind of just making a few notes about it. And the response that Steve got back was very like unprofessional is probably the best way to say it. And I felt that there was beginning to be a lot of tension between them. And it was a few other things too. There was complaints that the material wasn't arriving on time. And long story short, here's just kind of how I'll kind of put a bow on some of this stuff here. Basically, materials were delayed, and that is in part on us. I'm absolutely taking that. But it got to a point where it started to get pretty bad between Steve and the contractor. So what do you have to do in a situation like this, right? When things are getting a little out of hand, as the, kind of coordinator, the leader, you need to try to nip things in the bud immediately. So I called a meeting, us three, we sat down at a coffee shop, and I basically was just like, you say your piece, and let's just figure this out, right? Like, what's going on? And after leaving that meeting, it was actually on a really, really good note. It felt very positive that we were going to get back on track with things. And unfortunately, shortly after that, it just didn't materialize. There just was a very big lack of respect that we felt on our end from the contracting side in regards to how Steve was being treated. And again, this is not a knock on the contractor in any way. He's a phenomenal guy. I take nothing against him. It's just it wasn't a great working relationship. And it got to a point where basically because there were certain delays and certain things weren't being met, he wanted more money. And we gave more money to it. And he also contributed more money on his end. He basically said, hey, look, if we have an extra 2 weeks on this job, if you could give a week, I'll give a week and we'll kind of split it. And at the end of the day, he was telling me that he wasn't even going to be profitable. And again, I don't like to hear that, right? That's not necessarily why any of us got in this business on that. But it got kind of crazy. And towards the end of it, it got so bad that he basically just left the job. And after leaving the job, him and I had about an hour-long conversation, and we basically decided that we were just going to cut ties. And when he left the job, there was still a lot of work that still needed to be done. And we had to bring in a second contracting crew. So basically, we ended up spending on that first contracting crew, it was anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000. And then we had to bring in a second contracting crew, which charged an additional $10,000. Now, if we would have brought our initial contracting crew in, we probably would have spent about 15 to 17,000 on this. So right there, now we're all in this just on the contracting side between the two crews for about 30 to 35,000. So almost double, if not double, what we initially had planned there. And on top of that, what made it even worse, not so much about the extra cost, is what made it even worse is the fact that we are now more delayed. And again, catching the market, and this is always a term that's thrown around. It's not timing the market; it's time in the market. Now, when you're going for rentals, yeah, 100%, I agree with that. It's not necessarily about timing the market; it's about time in the market. But when you're going for flips, it is about time in the market because that summer craze is so important to catch. And if you want to, top the market on what you're potentially going to sell your house for, which is what we were really trying to do, 300,000 would have been the highest that a house sold for there, but we felt confident that we could get there. We need to do it in summer. It has to be done, especially in the beginning of summer. It's got to get listed. So we have delays now. We end up spending an extra 15,000 on just the contracting side. We have to spend more on material, and now we're facing delays. Now the work eventually gets done. And at this point, I want to say now we're up in the end of June. So the work's getting done at the end of June. This house isn't even listed yet. So here's another mistake that we made. So mistake number one, when you have a big project going on, don't use a brand new contracting crew. That's probably what I'll say. Boil it down, right? And also set healthy expectations as best as you possibly can. Mistake number two is when we bought this house, we did not get a U&O, which I'm telling everybody right now, you should get. And I think we got a little bit slick. We thought, where we usually buy, they're not pretty crazy. Well, this township was pretty crazy. And they literally tracked us down. The LLC that we bought this in was still under the old mailing address of my old house, which I have rented out. It's a duplex that I have. So they were sending mail there. And the tenant that I have there just, I still get some mail there. So I guess they didn't think that it was that big of a deal. And they basically weren't telling me that I was getting this mail. And I came to pick up the rent one day and I grab the mail and I see a bunch of these notices from the township. And basically they fined us for not getting the UNO. And because it went so long and we missed a court date, they like basically fined us like $750 for missing this UNO. So I had to send out a check to them, get it paid off. It is what it is. But that's basically an extra $1,000 down the drain. And then here's why this actually turned out to be even worse. It's not so much of not getting the UNO, because we were renovating the house. We were kind of like, whatever, like it's not going to pass a UNO anyway, right? A use and occupancy, by the way, something that you need to get a certificate of occupancy is something that you need to get before you move into a property. We weren't moving in. We're like, we're renovating this place. We'll get the UNO after. It'll pass. It is what it is. What this township does in particular is they make you get a sewer scope. And for anybody that doesn't know, if you haven't listened to this podcast, the sewer lines are my kryptonite, right? Steve and I, we die on the sewer lines. But basically, we didn't get this sewer scope when we bought the property. And then when we finally got this house listed, which I'm trying to even remember, guys, when it was. So it just closed. It just closed at the end of October. And it went under contract in the middle of September. And I think we listed it in the middle of August. So we listed in the middle of August. And I'll back it up a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm being a little sporadic. A lot of this is off the top of the head here. But we listed in the middle of August. We held an open house. Only like 2 people showed up. And again, this is what we were worried about. We were worried about listing this house towards the end of summer. We wanted to list in the beginning of summer, and these delays killed us. We listed in the end of August. I think we went under contract. We went under contract in the beginning of September. So it was listed we listed at 300. We still tried to set the market there. It was listed. We had one person come in. They put an offer in. It was way below. They put an offer in at like 260. We held a second open house. Somebody else came in. They ended up offering on it, and they offered 285, but they wanted like a 12.5K seller assist. So basically it would have been at like 270, 2.5. Long story short, they only got about a 9K seller assist. So we ended up going under contract for all things equal at 275,000. So 275,000 is what we go under contract with. We're starting to proceed towards closing. Now they're using an FHA loan, which for anybody that doesn't know, I abide by the FHA as a cheat code to get into real estate. When you are flipping a house and you have someone buying with an FHA, it tends to be a little bit challenging. All these inspections are taking place. All these things are happening, and they need to get a CO. So they call over the inspector for the certificate of occupancy, and he does a sewer scope. And what does he say? The trap is backwards, which I've never even heard of before, and there's roots growing through the pipe. You got to get it fixed. So we call over our plumber. He's certified. He gets it fixed. That's another $7,000, right? So here we are. We're an extra $15,000 in with the contracting side. We're an extra $7,000 in with the plumbing side. We're an extra $1,000 in fees of stupid fees that we got caught buying into. So where are we at right now? We're at like $23,000. Here's where the remaining comes in. We get the sewer scope done. The FHA, they approve everything. Everything goes smoothly. We go towards closing. We have to reorder the C&O for the guy to come back out and reinspect. And we're like, cool, we're gonna pass. Like, he passed everything else in the house. We got the sewer line fixed. We fixed the concrete where we had to cut open into the sewer line. He comes around and he's like, hey, the concrete's like not even done. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, like you have to do all of the concrete across the entire side of the house because it's messed up. We had no idea that he even said this. This wasn't written anywhere. It seems like he kind of pulled it out of thin air. He said that he spoke to some guy about it. Meanwhile, the only people that he would be speaking to is Steve or myself, and neither of us heard this. So now basically the day before closing, we find this out and we need to push closing out a week. And we have to get all this concrete work done. There's your extra $7,000, $8,000. So it's an extra $30,000 to $31,000 down the drain in this flip, where we could have profited obviously a significant amount more. Now, thankfully, we got most of it done. It wasn't fully complete. The buyers were okay with doing a temporary UNO, a temporary CO, where we held $5,000 back in escrow. Our contractors were able to finish it that week after we closed, and that escrow amount was released back to us. So we got that $5,000. But all in all, guys, $30,000 that should have been there down the drain. And here's how we could have prevented it. Number one, again, and this is my personal recommendation, don't put brand new contractors on jobs. Try them out on some smaller things. Really, make sure that you set clear, healthy expectations. I think that costed us $15,000, that wasn't done properly. Number two, get a U&O before you buy the house. That costed us, no joke, that costed us the other $15,000. We spent that $750 on fees. We spent the, $7,000 on plumbing, and then the extra, $7,000, wherever it was, on the concrete. If we would have done those things, we would have done two things. A, we would have saved on our renovation budget, but B, we definitely would have made even more on the flip, not just because of the renovation budget save, but because the holding costs, we add an extra 2-3 months, which is an extra $4,000 to $6,000 in holding costs. And also, if we would have listed at the time that we wanted, which was beginning of that summer period, we probably would have sold for even closer to that 300 mark. It might not have been 300, but we sold for 275. I think we absolutely would have sold for about 285 to 290, which is an extra $10,000 to $15,000 in profit there. So overall, this could have been close to $100,000 flip in a 6-month time frame. But those mistakes were made. And at the end of the day, fine. I mean, how much money do you spend in college, right? $50,000, $100,000. We lost $30,000 on a flip, still made $45,000. And I learned more than any college, class could teach me. So overall, I'm still very happy. Again, it's like opportunity cost. You kind of lost that there, but we learned so much. And again, we are rental people, Steve and I, we like rentals, but it is nice to have a flip come in every quarter or so to kind of, jolt some cash flow into the business. But all in all, guys, I'm going to put a cap on it there for today. Keep your eyes open for an Advent episode that I have coming out. I'm going to have it come out right before, right after Thanksgiving this week, because November 30th is the start of Advent, and Advent is such a beautiful time. For anybody who doesn't know what Advent is, it's leading up to Christmas, and what we really focus on in Advent is the coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and it's seen in twofold. I'll give just kind of quick background here. It's seen in the fold of Christ, being born in the manger on Christmas Day, but it's also seen in fold of the coming of the second coming of Jesus Christ, and how we kind of prepare our preparations for that. So I'm very excited about that. And I have a big announcement on that podcast episode as well that I'm excited to kind of talk about. But in any regard, I hope to see you guys at the Rosary and Real Estate event on November 25th at 6:30 p.m. Virtual. You can catch the link in the show notes to sign up for that. Join the school community. We're going to have a huge giveaway on the 100th members joining. So that's coming up. We're at 81 members now. And pray the Rosary, buy real estate, guys. Don't do what makes you happy. Do what makes you holy. It's great talking with you. Peace out.